I thought about a couple of ways to start this video, and the best thing that I could come up with is just to start very direct, which is to say, I know a lot of white people. You could say that I have a white friend. See how I flip that? I think I've gotten a lot of questions from some of my white friends recently about, like, what can I do to help? What place do I have in this movement, basically? Because I think for some reason, because this has constantly happened, and my fear is that just like all those other times when something like this has happened, that people are going to look at it, a small subset of people are going to look at it, they're going to get so frustrated and tired of the pain, and they're just going to look away because they can, and then it's going to happen again. And it's a vicious cycle. And that is the fear, right? That once again, people are going to get tired of all of the scariness and the realness and the discomfort of it all. And they're just gonna... And I think that is peak white privilege. A white person can, buckle up and, act a certain way and get away from a routine stop, as an example. And a lot of people, I think, are blissfully unaware that's a thing. They've just existed in it for so long that it doesn't faze them anymore. And it's really, really important now to recognize that. I think now a lot of people are kind of waking up to the fact that, hey, something's not right in this country. Something's not right that I keep on getting treated in such a way that I get treated, but friends and strangers and people of color, they don't. There's a clear disparity, and people are noticing that. And I think that's really critical. So when I get asked questions about things of that nature, what can I do? What's my place in all of this? I'm typically happy to answer them, because I know some people aren't. I know that some people, some black people, some people of color are not here for the concept of explaining themselves and explaining why and how a white person should help in a situation, because quite frankly, they should not have to. And I get that. I'm just trying to do my best, because over the years, I've tried to be an anchor for people. I've tried to be somebody who is a listener, somebody who can impart wisdom, and if not that, just to be somebody who someone can go to, right? And so I don't want to change who I am now, especially when I feel like people might need me. And I take great pride in that. So that's the reason why it doesn't bother me. Don't be surprised. Like, if you are a white person and you reach out to another black person and they get snippy with you, or they decide they don't want to talk about it, that's okay for them to do that. We've been centuries and centuries of having to be beholden to a master race. A lot of people are bitter about that to this day for good reason. And so it's really important to recognize that just because a Black person is not okay with you doesn't mean that you get to stop fighting for us and for that equality and that justice. And that's a really long way of saying that, hey, I'm here to help, right? The issue on the table is that there's a lot of inequity and injustice and disparity and problematic stuff surrounding the plight of the Black person in this country. The problem was started with white people. And that's just how it happened. And that means whether the movement likes it or not, and I know there's people that don't, but it means that white people have to be part of the solution. Black people do not need to be educated on what's going on. They do not need to be scolded for protesting. They do not need to be scolded for rioting. They do not need to be talked to like children. They don't need things explained to them. We're fully aware and equipped to understand our situation. What a person who is white has to do to help right now is to use their platform to speak out against injustice, right? Just start talking about it. Start educating yourself on history, Black history, the history of Black people in this country. Start educating yourself and then start educating other white people who may not get it. Right? That's what you can do. It's super easy to sit back and say, well, I'm another white person. What do I contribute to the situation? Will it not be annoying if I put myself out there? You know? And that's not a thing. Like, we need those voices. That's incredibly important for you to know our struggle and for you to then tell other white people who don't know our struggle and educate people like you to help further the movement. Speak out. Use your platform. It doesn't matter how small your platform is. You could be talking to 2 people, talking to 1 person. You could be talking to 2 million people. I don't know who you are watching this. You could be talking to a huge range of people. If you have a platform, and everybody does now, because of social media, because of Twitter, because of Facebook, because of Instagram, whatever, if you have a platform, you have a responsibility to combat injustice and to use your platform to further the cause of equality. It is that simple. And it is important to come at these situations with a heart that is open, willing to learn, and a heart that is unclouded by guilt. We don't need white guilt. We don't have time to babysit white guilt. We get it. you're seeing this stuff and maybe even finally paying attention to it for the first time. I know there are plenty of people, and I know these people that have been fighting and speaking out for a very long time. But there's a lot of people who are kind of now drawing a circle around the situation and saying, this is bad. I feel so bad. Who cares? I hate to be that blunt, but who cares if you feel bad? People are dying. This isn't new. There is no time for white guilt right now. There is only time for action. And I've had a lot of people ask me about the protests. Specifically, I had one person ask me, am I a bad person for not wanting to go to the protests? And the answer to that question is no, you're not a bad person. You shouldn't feel bad for not wanting to go to the protest because you've seen it on the news. You've seen the police firing tear gas and rubber bullets and all this stuff and firing these things and using these deterrents incorrectly and violently against peaceful protesters. And you have evidence of this happening. And so I would think that you would be crazy to not weigh those risks and figure if that's something that you should be doing or not. Because there's a couple of things that are impacting this whole situation is that people are getting hurt. People are losing eyes. People are dying. People have been shot. Like, there's a lot going on. There's curfews. There's the National Guard. There's so much violent stuff happening now, and a lot of it is unprovoked. A lot of it is going on. And it is such a risk to do that stuff. You know, you can go and march and protests can turn peaceful, but like even Martin Luther King, with all these peaceful protests, a lot of those protests turn violent because the powers that be did not like it. And they turned hoses on them and they did all kinds of stuff to deter them and to make those things violent. So that race is such a sensitive thing, and it always has been. And very frequently, very often, almost regularly, they turn violent. And not because of the protesters, but just because they do. A woman was kneeling and an officer took her mask off and maced her in the face. She was doing nothing and she got maced in the face just because he felt like it. A child was maced by a police officer here in Seattle. I'm around this. And I guess you could argue, why would you bring a child to a protest? But, you know, people bring children to large gatherings and protest things all the time without incident. It's just these types of protests are very sensitive. And you've got a lot of people who do not want to see systems changed. And so lots of bad stuff can possibly happen. It's also very much worth noting the fact that COVID-19 is still a big thing. Racism didn't scare the global pandemic away, unfortunately. After those reopen protests the other week, 19,000 new cases were reported in the US. Imagine what those numbers will be 2 weeks from now after all of this. These protests are very needed, but that is another huge risk of going that I completely forgot to mention. So if you do go, be prepared to handle that. So no, I don't think that not going to protests makes you a bad person, but I think it's incredibly critical that whether or not you are going to protests is that you use your voice on your platforms to speak out, to tell your stories, to educate other white people about what privilege is, and to help them understand what the plight is so they know exactly what you're fighting for and so they know exactly what the people of color are fighting for. That's so critical, right? You have a platform, why wouldn't you use it? I know, you know, the idea of going to a protest, I think, is very, I'm struggling to come up with a word for it, but I guess whimsical would be something that I'm thinking of off the top of my head. Is the idea of like going and it's just like, yeah, it's exciting and I feel like I'm making a difference, but then you're not having that middle step of using your voice and your platforms, right? Because because you go to a protest and there's a lot of people who are unbothered by the idea of the people knowing that they've gone to protests. But if you are any kind of concerned about your personal well-being, a lot of companies don't like the fact that people are protesting, funnily enough. And so the recommendation is that you cover your face, you cover your eyes, you cover identifiable markings on your body, tattoos and things of that nature. You don't take pictures because those are geotagged and they can be tracked and they can be used against you. There's a call from protesters that say, hey, don't post people's faces without permission because people can track that stuff. So reasonably speaking, you shouldn't be posting stuff about the protest, right? And being there. And so who are you going for if you're not using your platforms and speaking out? We absolutely need the white voice. We need it for a very specific task, and that is to help raise other white voices up and educate those people. I've said it. I keep on saying it. I keep on hammering it home, but it's important. That's what's needed. Donate. Talk about it. Tell people you're donating. You can block out the numbers and the amounts and everything like that, but tell people. Share resources. Tell your stories. Educate yourself. Read up. Don't pretend like your voice doesn't matter, because it does. And unfortunately, given the situation, kind of almost matters more than a black person's sometimes. That might be an incredibly controversial thing to say, but people don't listen to black people sometimes. There's an entire subset of people who just don't listen and who don't get it. And they need a push from someone like them for the light bulb to finally go off and say, okay, that makes sense. I think it's that easy. I've seen a lot of my white friends and a lot of white people using their platforms for good and to help. And I think it's incredibly great and wonderful to see that. I think it's I haven't seen as much as I would have expected from people that I know. And that's a little disheartening. But I try to talk to my white friends about why this is important now. I don't know that I did before, but maybe I need to do it more. It's just incredibly important to use your voice, no matter who you are, to fight injustice. And right now it's required. It's so easy. That's another part of white privilege, that it is so easy for you to just close your eyes and look away and bury your head in the sand and not think about it anymore as we wait for another black person to be murdered. I can't look away. I can't. Literally, I can't. I have to be looking constantly. I have to look over my shoulder to make sure. Make sure I'm not next. Make sure that other people are safe. And if you feel comfortable with it, you can even physically help by being around to hold police and other people accountable. If you see the police harassing a black person, you can get in the way of that situation. Ask for badge numbers. Be vocal. Get crazy. Get loud. Make a show of getting badge numbers and texting them to people. physically and actually doing that and holding them accountable in the streets. And you shouldn't have to do that because it should be a fair system, but it's not a fair system. And so if you have the ability to get loud and to question and contradict and be an eyewitness and corroborate the stories of your fellow person to make sure that they're safe. It really is that easy. Because in a world where racism and white privilege can and has been weaponized and turned into a death sentence sometimes for people, you have the opportunity to use that privilege to make a difference and to help your fellow man, woman, whoever. And that's super important too. But at the very least, use your platform to speak up. It is your place. It is your responsibility. It is needed. And it is helpful. I want to make sure that we have as many allies as possible right now. I want to make sure that people stop looking away. I want to make sure that people keep fighting. I want people to see that I'm fucking angry. I really want them to see it. Because I don't get angry. I'm not an angry person, but I want people to know. I want people to see it, and I want people to be inspired by it. Because if I'm angry, what the hell should you be? This feels different, and I have a lot of hope in my heart that something is going to happen, but it's very easy to not have faith in something happening because it hasn't happened before. I just know that this feels different, and I hope that it can continue because it needs to continue. And it only continues if you keep looking.